This is the Visible Voices podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Resa E. Lewis. Well, audience, 2024 has drawn to a close, and I've had quite a few injections. Yes, I did say injections, get it, doctor injections, of joy. Top among these is dropping 28 Visible Voices podcast episodes, chock full of powerful conversation and transformative story. Another injection of joy came from the launch of my co-authored book, Microskills, Small Actions, Big Impact, published by HarperCollins. I dropped 20 episodes highlighting conversations and interviews about the book, thanks to the generosity of other podcast hosts. For the Visible Voices podcast, my guests brought it, as they do every year, to be clear. And by the way, I started this podcast in 2020. The guests brought their voices, their stories, their experiences, and their insights, all inspiring in the healthcare, equity, and current trends spaces. Today's episode is a special one, as you may imagine. We will revisit some of the memorable moments and thank the incredible team that makes this podcast possible. Some of the challenging issues in healthcare can lead to inspiring conversations that leave us feeling healed, hopeful, and, well, I was looking for a third H there, but let's just say energized.
Betrayal is often unintentional. It doesn't mean that people get up in the morning planning to hurt somebody on the other side of this equation. It's unintentional. I made a decision that was based on incomplete information. I did not project the consequences of that. So the response to it, when somebody stands up and says, "Ooh, hey, this doesn't hit right with me," is not to get defensive, but to say, "Tell me more. Let's talk this through. How can we come to a mutually agreeable solution that allows your moral obligations to remain intact?"
Dr. Wendy Dean joined us to discuss her prescient book, If I Betray These Words, Moral Injury in Medicine and Why It's So Hard for Clinicians to Put Patients First. Moral injury is the psychological distress experienced when someone is forced to participate in, witness, or fail to prevent an act that deeply violates their own moral code, their beliefs. This can lead to feelings of guilt, shame, and a loss of faith in oneself or the world around them. This typically occurs in high-stakes situations like in combat or in healthcare. Wendy's work and our conversation illuminated the invisible burdens healthcare professionals face and the systemic changes needed to address them. She reminded us that advocacy for clinicians' well-being is actually advocacy for better care for everyone.
I would say that no matter who you are and what you perceive your own identity to be, how society treats you, you can't make a difference sitting on your couch. Your government won't change. Your life won't change. That's true in every realm. And this is something that people die for in other countries around the world still. And we have the privilege of doing it safely.
Professor Wendy Schiller is Brown University's Interim Director of the Watson Institute for International and Public Affairs. As co-author of Inequality Across State Lines, Wendy gave us a masterclass on the intersections of inequality and democracy, specifically focusing on gun violence and women seeking safety from abusive partners. Her insights on how state-level policies shape national outcomes challenge us to exercise our civic health. Most importantly, Wendy encouraged us to get off our couches and vote.
Most people end up in powerful positions because they want to be powerful. They want to make decisions and flex their muscles. And I am blessed to end up in a powerful position because I want to make a difference. I want to help. And it's been far too long that women have never had these opportunities in Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania House Speaker and attorney Joanna McClinton brought her passion for public service to the podcast. Her reflections on voter safety, school safety, and her journey as a trailblazer in the law and in politics reinformed the importance of action and participation in civic health.
We were never intentionally trying to do a school program. We just wanted to get something up and running at the hospital and do an after-school program. But after a few weeks of doing stuff at the school, the students were like, "You guys are coming back, right?" And at that point, we started realizing, I said, we're making an impact because we're just trying to have them participate in workshops and then have them transition to after school activities, like an after school community program. But, we recognize it's like we're having an impact with these students that are here and they're interested because they're asking us to come back. I said, we can't stop this. I was like, we're onto something, and this is going to become the basis of our school intervention. And it's like, wow, a noble concept. We're going to work with people before they become patients. You know more than anybody that it costs so much money to treat an emergency, but what if we just did something that was really, really proactive before the emergencies kick in? How could that be so transformative?
Changemaker, friend, emergency medicine physician, Dr. Rob Gore is known for his innovative leadership and community empowerment to break cycles of violence. Rob shared his insights on the public health epidemic of gun violence. Rob reminded us of the importance of a human-centered design and holistic approach. His book, Treating Violence, An Emergency Room Doctor Takes on a Deadly American Epidemic, is part memoir and part testament to CAVI, the Kings Against Violence Initiative.
It's the reason why I like being the person that gets to meet a person when they come in the ER, because they come in with all these emotions, all kinds of things. And it is, oh my gosh, I can't barely describe it when you see them fearful, angry, upset, scared, depressed, whatever. And just by listening to them, just sitting there and just being a calm presence in the room and just listening to them, you just watch them transform right in front of you. Everything about them changes. Their demeanor changes. They just decompress. And I love that. It's almost magical. I just enjoy that, to watch a person just go from 100 miles an hour down to a really manageable speed and on their terms.
That was Dr. Thea James, Vice President of Mission and Associate Chief Medical Officer at Boston Medical Center. Thea is an emergency medicine physician with a cult following in Boston and beyond. Dr. Kalma Ennis, emergency medicine and lifestyle medicine physician, shared her experience working on her 4-part docuseries, Faces of Medicine. Thea is one of the featured docs in the doc, which highlights the journeys, successes, and struggles of Black female physicians who account for less than 3% of U.S. doctors.
When I go down the preventive care route, I think it's fundamentally about education. And I think it's empowering people by giving them the knowledge and the tools they need for how to live healthier lives. But then there are so many structural elements also that come into it. Access to healthy food that differs dramatically from zip code to zip code. Even access to education, fundamentally, quality education that differs basically based on where you're born. And so I do think there's a whole host of things that we need to think about solving as a society to ensure that those preventive elements are in place so that we don't need to be sick care focused anymore, while at the same time making sure that people have access to the sick care that they need when they need it.
That was Pooja Kumar, MD, MBA, senior partner at McKinsey & Company and global leader of the McKinsey Health Institute. Pooja's optimism about what's possible when healthcare systems invest in education, access, and people was both refreshing and motivating.
When I realized that chasing money and chasing joy are often two totally different things, it gave me this big aha. That was probably, Resa, the beginning of realizing that I had a voice, because it meant that I had control, right? I did have control, and I could shape my future, which was a great place to be.
Joe Saul-Sehy, co-author of Stacked, Your Super Serious Guide to Modern Money Management, brought humor and wisdom to our conversation about financial health. Joe is host of the immensely popular, entertaining, and educational Stacking Benjamins Show, a top personal finance podcast.
I do think diversity is a strength. And I think if you have people from all different backgrounds and all different life experiences and genders, you will make better decisions to surround yourself and be an active listener. And so I've always tried to ensure that not only did I set a broad table, but that I invited people in and tried to make them feel comfortable. And the more senior you got in organizations, the more you have to work to make people feel comfortable. Because they begin to think you have all the answers and you don't. Or they think that they're not as smart as you, and they are. And so I learned part of leadership is empowering others by giving space for their voices and giving validation to their ideas and encouraging them to push back and tell me what they really think.
The Honorable Valerie Jarrett, Chief Executive Officer and Board of Directors member of the Obama Foundation. She authored a book, Finding My Voice, My Journey to the West Wing and the Path Forward. So clearly she had to be on the Visible Voices podcast, given that her book was entitled Finding My Voice. Valerie shared her incredible journey in leadership, Her deeply personal reflections on service, equity, and perseverance left me energized and inspired. She reminded us that leadership starts with a commitment to serve others.
If something takes me an extra 3 seconds, I will easily spend hours to just get rid of that 3-second thing. It almost doesn't seem like it's a wise investment of my time, but it gets under my skin. It gets stuck in my brain. And I'm like, there's got to be a better way to do this. I mean, that's literally why I made MD Calc, and most of the other things I build is I'm actually building it for myself because it just bugs me. It just gets under my skin. And so I will build a little website or build a little tool that makes this thing that takes either too much time or it's too complex, and tries to boil it down to its essence or down to a level that's way more easy for a human to get through and handle.
And finally, Dr. Graham Walker, friend, emergency medicine physician, health tech visionary, co-founder of MD Calc, the NNT, the Physician's Charter for Responsible AI, and Off Call. Graham took us into the future with his work at the intersection of AI, innovation, and healthcare. His insights showcased how technology can revolutionize patient care. His optimism for what's possible left me feeling inspired and ready to embrace the future of healthcare. Graham hosts the podcast How I Doctor, where he explores the art and science of medicine. This year, audience, would not have been possible without the extraordinary guests who shared their stories and expertise. And importantly, a huge thank you to the team at the Visible Voices podcast, including, not limited to, the People's Media Network, Ms. Alicia Cepeda-Mall, Dr. Giuliano DePortu, and Mr. Tamafai Prats. And you listeners, huge thank you to you for being part of the Visible Voices podcast community. As we step into 2025, let's please continue to amplify the voices and the truths that commit to meaningful and healthy change. That's it for now, and I'll see you next time. The Visible Voices podcast amplifies voices in the healthcare, equity, and current trend spaces. We are a production of the People's Media Network. Our team includes Dr. Giuliano DePortu and me, Dr. Resa E. Lewis. Please find me through my website and on social media, Resa E. Lewis, MD, or through the podcast, thevisiblevoicespodcast.com. Please give us a 5-star rating on Apple or wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, please be sure to share the show with a friend. The views and opinions expressed by the host and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the opinion of the institution with which they are affiliated or identified. Information herein should never be used as a substitute for clinical judgment or for medical advice.